In this video, we'll be explaining why cards are on the ban list, going over extra deck monsters, and in this video, we'll be going over some of the more recent banned ones, which have all been extra deck monsters, funny enough. Starting off with the very fun dragon, also known as True King of all Calamities. This is a generic rank 9 monster, which requires any 2+ level 9 monsters as its materials, and has the effect where, on a quick effect, you can detach one of its materials to declare an attribute. Then, all face-up monsters in the field become that attribute, and all monsters your opponent controls with that attribute cannot activate their effects or attack. It also has an additional effect where if you would use one of your True King or True Dracos to destroy cards and activate their summoning costs, you can choose monsters on your opponent's side of the field that have the appropriate attributes. But that's not why people use this card. It's definitely for its first effect, which basically locks your opponent out of playing the game for a turn. Most decks in the competitive metagame are very monster effect heavy, to the point where even hand traps are actually monster cards most of the time, despite the fact that they're ironically called traps. And this card applies a continuous effect to the field for a whole turn, which doesn't need this card to stay on the field in order to keep that effect in place. So if you just activate this card's effect during your opponent's draw phase, and your opponent's not able to immediately negate the activation of the effect, then there's nothing they can do about the effect on the field for the entire turn. They'll just be locked out of being able to use monster effects and attacking. So they can't even try to get rid of True King of all Calamities unless they have a spell or trap card removal at the ready, or some kind of negate they can use during their draw phase, like Forbidden Droplet. And since it's so hard to play around this card once the effect actually is activated, it was basically a 1-card win condition if you had a way to go into level 9 monsters easily. And that was kind of the limiting factor of this card for the longest time, because of how unpopular level 9 monsters were in the past. It did see play in the meta, but never saw enough play where it was that big of a deal. That was until the Virtual World archetype came out. They are an archetype of monsters who consist of nothing but level 3 and 6 main deck monsters, and also specialize into going to Synchros and XC summons, which made them the perfect archetype for going into True King of all Calamities very easily during their first turn. And in fact, most Virtual World decks can go into 2 copies of it. What they could do is just their normal plays in order to special summon themselves from the hand in order to go into a whole bunch of synchro plays, and then maybe use their trap card from the graveyard in order to reduce the level of their archetype specific level 9 monster to level 6. That way, they could use it with one of their level 3 synchro monsters to go into Cloud Castle in order to bring back that synchro monster and have 2 level 9 monsters in the field for a True King of all Calamities. That was one of the main ways to bring this card out, but there were others, although a lot of them did involve using Cloud Castle in order to bring back a level 9 monster from the graveyard. If anything, Cloud Castle was a huge contributing factor to True King of all Calamities being easy to bring out as well. And since this card became easier to bring out and already had a pretty busted effect anyway, it was banned in March of 2021. Could True King of all Calamities be unbanned? Seeing as this card was recently banned, that's probably a no. I honestly would have expected them to ban Cloud Castle before True King of all Calamities, since Konami likes to ban combo pieces rather than the actual problem cards themselves, although actually hitting the main problem card turned out to be a good decision, because its effect is a little bit too strong. You don't even need to call the appropriate attribute that your opponent is playing. You can just call Divine and still lock down your opponent's field. The only benefits to trying to call a specific type of attributes is being able to negate the monster effects in your opponent's hand as well. How could True King of all Calamities be fixed to be unbanned? I think if they made its effect tied to True King of all Calamities being on the field, that would give it enough of an out where your opponent could reasonably try to counterplay its effect. Like a Skill Drain, for example. It's a trap card that allows you to negate the monster effects of all monsters of the field, but you can get rid of it if you destroy that card, and get rid of the effect immediately. Plus, the card doesn't prevent you from attacking and affects both players. Skill Drain is limited to 1 copy and is a really strong card, but there is some counter-measure play around it that True King of all Calamities just doesn't really have. So if they were to fix the card, they could probably do it like Skill Drain, where it only negates your opponent's card effects while this card is face up on the field. So if it is flipped face down or sent to the graveyard, then its lockdown effect stops. This could be helped further along if they didn't also stop your opponent from attacking, because if it keeps its effect as is, it's still kind of hard for your opponent to actually get rid of the card in order to stop its effect. Although that would also open up the option of counterplay of just negating the card's effect for a turn was something like Infinite Impermanence or Effect Veiler. Basically, it can keep its effect just to have some way to play around it. Next up, we have number S0, Utopic ZEXAL. This is a rank 1 monster, which can be brought out using 3 number Xyz monsters with the same rank as materials, or by ranking this on top of a Utopia monster you control by discarding any rank up magic normal spell card. Then, while this card is on the field, it has a quick effect where you can detach one of its materials in order to make it so your opponent can't activate card effects this turn. So it's kinda like True King of all Calamities, except better, because it locks down everything instead of just monsters. Although better might be a little bit too hard of a term. Sure, the effect itself is better, but it was always balanced around the fact that it's a lot harder to bring out. And also, its attack and defense are dependent on the amount of Xyz materials it has, as its attack and defense are equal to 1000 times the number of Xyz materials. So if you detach too many in order to activate its effect, it will get weaker and weaker and easier to attack over, especially since it doesn't stop your opponent from attacking like True King of all Calamities does. Now, over the years, there were some decks that could turbo this card out, but generally they were able to stop a lot of them by just banning rank up Magic Argent Chaos Force, and it only occasionally saw play in the metagame. Then, for some reason, they released a card called Numeron Calling, which has the effect that if you have Numeron Network field spell card out and no monsters, you can special summon up to 4 Numeron Gate Xyz monsters with different names from your extra deck, but they're banished during the end phase. And also, you can only normal or special summon once for the rest of the turn. And what do you know, Numerons have 4 Xyz monsters who are all number monsters and of the same rank, numbers 1 through 4 Numeron Gates. Although this is restricted by the fact that you need the field spell card Numeron Network. However, Numeron Network's only effect is basically to search out Numeron Calling, as its effect allows you to use its effect from the deck as long as you meet the conditions for that card on the field. And so all of this allowed you to bring out Utopic ZEXAL pretty easily with 3 materials, and then you can just lock down your opponent for a turn and do your plays on your next turn with 2 more full lockdowns ready to go. And funny enough, this one card combo that brought out number S0 Utopic ZEXAL is not the full reason why this card was banned. It was actually banned as a preemptive measure in the TCG because 2 new cards were going to be released, namely ZS Ascend Sage and ZEXAL Construction. Ascend Sage has the effect that allows it to special summon itself from your hand if you control no cards, and if it's used as an Xyz material for a Utopia monster, it gains the effect to search out a rank up magic normal spell card from your deck. So with ZS Ascend Sage, it basically turned any other level 4 monster into an instant number S0 Utopic ZEXAL, because normally they didn't have convenient searchers for rank up magic normal spell cards, which they could now search out by just going into a Utopia monster and then searching it out with its inherited effect. Further helped along with ZEXAL Construction, which basically allows you to search out any rank up magic normal spell card, or ZS Ascended Sage. And being able to bring out Utopic ZEXAL with 2 level 4 monsters with 4 materials is way more convenient and useful than the Numeron Calling method. And it's kinda crazy that 2 avenues exist to bring out this broken card easily. Which is why number S0 Utopic ZEXAL was banned in March of 2021, right before ZS Ascend Sage or ZEXAL Construction would come out, with them also unbanning rank up Magic Argent Chaos Force at the same time. Can number S0 Utopic ZEXAL be unbanned? I'm surprised it took them this long to get it banned in the first place, seeing as it was banned over in the OCG already. But this card's somewhat easy summoning condition for how good its lockdown effect is. It was only a matter of time before they released something that made this card coming out a little bit too easy. Kinda like what they did with Gossip Shadow and Rongo Miniad. How could they fix number S0 Utopic ZEXAL to be unbanned? Usually, my go-to for fixing extra deck monsters is just to make them harder to summon. But this one is already somewhat difficult. Konami just for some reason decided to make it much easier to come out, with Numeron Calling in ZS Ascend Sage. So that probably wouldn't help in this situation. Instead, what they could do is probably fix its broken effect. Locking out your opponent from activating card effects for an entire turn is a tad bit too powerful. If they instead made it an Omni Negate, or require detaching 3 materials instead of 1, it would definitely be a lot less powerful, but still useful. If you can only detach 1 in order to negate an effect, that would still be super good. And if you detach all 3 materials in order to lock out your opponent for 1 turn, it would still be really good and probably not slow it down enough to stop it from being overpowered. Generally, I'm not a huge advocate for changing the function of cards when I suggest changes, so I'm kind of stumped on how to make this one less broken, besides just banning the brand new support that came out, so that it's not easy to bring out. Next up, we have Union Carrier. This is a Link 2 monster which can be brought out with any 2 monsters of the same type or attribute, so very generous requirements for its summon, and has the effect where once per turn, you can target 1 face-up monster you control in order to equip any monster from your hand or deck to that monster, who shares the same original type or attribute. Then it goes on to give that card the effect where the monster will gain 1000 attack, and has a couple of restrictions, where if you equip a monster from your deck, you can't special summon a monster with that card's name for the rest of the turn, and Union Carrier itself cannot be used as a link material the turn it's summoned. So to simplify this card's effect a little bit further, this card basically allows you to get any cards in your deck in the graveyard, and also situationally can be used to kind of cheese the activation requirement of some cards that have effects that activate when they're sent from the field to the graveyard, like Dawn Knight, Dragon Buster Destruction Sword, and Earthbound Immortal Auto-matic. Dawn Knight has the effect that if it's sent from the field to the graveyard, you can send any one light monster from your deck to the graveyard. And since Union Carrier can just equip Dawn Knight to itself from the deck, since it itself is a light monster, and since sending Dawn Knight from the equip zone to the graveyard technically counts as sending it from the field to the graveyard, Union Carrier basically turns into a Foolish Burial for any light attribute monster, which was very useful in Drytron, since pretty much all their main deck monsters are light attribute, and can special summon themselves from the graveyard. It can also be used in order to equip Dragon Buster Destruction Sword to a dark attribute monster, in order to very easily lock your opponent out of summoning from their extra deck, which was not supposed to be that easy, since Dragon Buster Destruction Sword was supposed to be balanced around the fact that it was part of an archetype that almost never used it. And Earthbound Immortal Auto-matic has the effect that if it's sent from the field to the graveyard, it destroys all of your opponent's face-up monsters, and inflicts 800 points of damage to your opponent for each monster destroyed. So if your opponent had a full board of monsters, you could basically deal half of your opponent's life points as damage. And it was even used in a couple of FTK strategies with Dragon Links. Although Union Carrier was intended to be used with the ABC Dragon Buster archetype, which is an archetype all around Union monsters and attaching other cards to stuff. But they ended up making Union Carrier a little bit too strong by making it completely generic, and not limiting it to only work with actual Union monsters. And because of all the unintended really good effects this card caused, it first got Dragon Buster Destruction Sword banned, and then when it was still super useful in Drytron decks, they eventually just banned the card itself, and then took Dragon Buster Destruction Sword off the ban list. Union Carrier was banned in March of 2021. Can Union Carrier be taken off the ban list? If they went ahead and just banned Dawn Knight, Earthbound Immortal Auto-matic, and then re-banned Dragon Buster Destruction Sword, then again, they could probably remove Union Carrier from the ban list until someone found a new way to break the card. The card itself is just a little bit too good for how versatile it is with being able to equip basically any monster from your deck to a card you control, who simply matches either its type or attribute. Even if they banned the known problem cards, there are probably new ones in the future, or just someone will find another old card that unintentionally works super well with this, like they did with Dragon Buster Destruction Sword. How could they fix Union Carrier to unban it? If they made it so it only worked with Union monsters, that would fix everything. 3 of the biggest problem cards with it are not Union monsters, and it was intended to be support for a deck that has almost nothing but Union monsters. And its whole theme is Union monsters anyway. It's even called Union Carrier. So, if the monster it could equip was simply restricted to Union monsters only, they could unban the card tomorrow and only ABC players would use it. And lastly, we have Linkross. This is a Link 1 monster, which requires a Link 2 or higher Link monster as its material, and has the effect where it can special summon a number of tokens equal to the Link rating of the monster used for this card's material, which is usually up to 2 tokens. And then the card goes on to have the restriction where the tokens cannot be used as Link materials for the rest of the turn. Now, this card's original intended use was to help out synchro decks by immediately giving you a downward pointing arrow from pretty much any Link monster, and then giving you a couple of tokens to be more flexible with synchro plays. But then, after the Master Rule revisions in 2020, where synchro monsters were no longer restricted to only Link zones or the extra monster zone, Linkross kinda became overpowered overnight. It was just an incredibly versatile combo climbing tool that could further along existing combo plays without losing any advantage, and in fact, giving you a +2 in card advantage with the extra tokens, which could be used after a Crystron Halki Fibrax in order to have a level 3 tuner to interact with those tokens it provided, in order to do all kinds of combos. One of the most common was using it with Martial Metal Marcher. I'll be showing a few of those combos on screen, but suffice to say, if you had a deck that liked to go into synchro monsters, then Linkross was going to make them 10 times better. There wasn't really one combo or card that made this card broken, because it was just so versatile in how it could be comboed with tuners and synchros in order to bring out heavy hitters, like Borreload Savage Dragon, Crystal Wing Synchro Dragon, or even Herald of the Arc Light. Being able to convert a combo piece into another combo piece that basically gives you +2 in card advantage, all while using a card from your extra deck that you don't need to search out, is pretty strong. Linkross was banned in December of 2020, after the Master Rule revisions were put through, and Konami saw just how widely used Linkross was in a whole bunch of different kinds of decks. Could Linkross be unbanned? Not currently, not unless they reintroduce the restrictions of Master Rule 4, or just ban a whole bunch of synchro monsters. Even if they banned one of its best friends, Crystron Halki Fibrax, Linkross is still incredibly valuable. Generally, this segment for banned cards and whether they should be unbanned or not is a lot more useful for older cards and not ones that were just banned. Just a side note. So, how could they fix Linkross to be unbanned? If they made it so the tokens cannot be used as synchro materials, it would completely kill the intended use of the card, but that would do it. The ability to bring out 2 tokens very easily mid-combo and then use them to go into synchro summons is why this card is currently banned. Alternatively, they could make this card just slightly harder to use. When Linkross was still running around, it was almost always used with a Link 2 monster. So if they simply made this card require a Link 3 or higher monster, that would limit its combo potential a little bit, where it would still definitely see play, but wouldn't be as overpowered as it is currently. Link 1 monsters are kind of inherently broken, because being able to go into an extra deck monster with only 1 card on the field has the potential to create cards like Linkross, where you can just further a combo play without losing any advantage. So, making you give up a tiny bit more advantage for its effect, and maybe only giving you a single token instead of multiple tokens, would probably be enough for the card to still be used in its intended way, but not be broken post-Master Rule 4. Alright, and those are the cards that were in one of the most recent banned lists as the first making this video, which only banned 3 extra deck monsters. So I thought it was a perfect opportunity to do another part on the banned extra deck monster series in order to just talk about them here. As always, if you have ideas for future videos or a series that I can make after I run out of banned cards to talk about, I'd love to hear about them down in the comments. Also, make sure to subscribe. The channel is near its 200,000 mark. That means only 60,000 more before I can pass my World of Warcraft channel.